Hi, it's Maija here and welcome to the final reads and receipts of the books I read in 2019. I will continue this project in 2020 with some changes, which will be in a separate video, but I'm taking January off. I've been mostly reading library books during January. So this December video is a bit late, but since you will not be getting a January reads and receipts, maybe this will tide you over until the end of February. I only managed to finish one book from my December TBR video. I'm in the middle of another one, and the other two, the ebooks, I didn't even start. But my TBR count at the start of the month was 70 books. So let's start with the reads, and the first thing that I read in December was Spellswept by Stephanie Burgis. This is an old ebook and it's a fantasy Regency romance novella. It's sort of an alt history thing, and I read this because there was this event going on called In December, which is run by Megan Tennant, which is about reading self-published indie books and reviewing them. And I decided to pick a bunch up, but I didn't end up putting up a review, so I will do that later. But that is the reason why I decided to pick this up right now. And this is part of the Harwood Spellbook novella series, and this is a prequel set before the first novella, Snowspelled. This tells the story of Amy, who is the sister-in-law of the main character of the first novella, and she is helping run this big party for politicians and magicians, and also planning an engagement to a magician to help advance her political prospects, but not everything goes to plan. These books deal a lot with gender career expectations. Only the men of noble families in this world can become magicians, and the women become politicians, but the Harwood family members go against these expectations. Meanwhile, Amy wants to advance her career in politics and get chosen for basically the government, but she needs to make a powerful marriage to help her get on with that, since as an orphan she doesn't have the clout of a big family name behind her. I like the Regency romance feel of these, and the world is interesting and they are fun and fast reads, but there's this story trend which was present in both these novellas that I've now read, which bothers me a bit. It's always given a good in-plot reason that I can't argue against in the confines of the story. It makes sense, but since it was present in both, it bothers me, and I can't say what it is because that would be a spoiler. I'll have to see if the third book has that element too and how I feel about the third novella, which I already own. But I like the characters and the world, and the writing style makes this very warm and fun. I gave this one 3.5 stars. Then from the library I read two fantasy comics. I read Monstress Volume 4, The Chosen by Marjorie Liu and Sana Takeda, and I reread Volume 3 as well. In this comic series, the world and the art is so detailed and luscious and wonderful, and it tells about the story of a woman and this monster who lives inside her, this monster god. And I love how many cool female characters we get in this world, and everything in the series is very dark and beautiful. I really like Volume 3, which I reread. It's one of my favorites of the volumes because it had this sort of buddy movie feels with Malka and Zin, the monster god, inside her. And I also really like the witch who had the Pomeranian. When the Pomeranian appeared on the page, I'm always so happy, I start laughing. Volume 4 wasn't one of my favorites. I wanted things to move forward more. And also the new character that was introduced, I didn't really care one way or another about them. And it felt a bit like setup, and it didn't have enough Zin in it. I gave Volume 3 4 stars and Volume 4 3.5 stars. Then I picked up another novella. This is an old ebook. It's a science fiction novella that I got in an old Hugo Voters packet, and it's Everything Belongs to the Future by Laurie Penny. And I pretty much only decided to read this because it was on my Kindle. It had been there for a while and it was short. This is a story about a group of anarchists set in this future where medicine against aging has been discovered, and it is very expensive, so pretty much only the rich can remain young and live forever. And this one was fine, it just wasn't my kind of thing. I pretty much only finished it because it was short. Neither the characters or the world gripped me. I wasn't really that interested in the plot, I wasn't interested in these people. It just didn't have any elements that I personally gravitate towards, and that's why I gave it 2 stars. Next I buddy read My Cousin Rachel by Daphne du Maurier with Shannon from That's So Poe. I got this book from the library, and I'd only read Rebecca by du Maurier before, and I hadn't seen this movie adaptation. I had the movie adaptation cover, but I loved Rebecca, and this one did have that atmospheric writing as well, but I think in Rebecca it was on a whole another level. It was like off the charts atmosphere. So the main character of this gothic mystery is Philip, who is this young man who has been raised by his cousin Ambrose in a grand country home with no women around. But then when Ambrose travels to Italy one summer and meets Rachel, ends up marrying her, while he's away and then suddenly dies, Philip is sure Rachel is to blame. So Rachel is coming to travel to visit Ambrose's home, so the two will soon meet and Philip plots revenge. But is Rachel what Philip imagined her to be, and are the suspicious letters that Ambrose sent before his death to be trusted? Philip is a young man who was raised by this temperamental hermit, basically, who he really idolizes, and he is an unlikable and unreliable protagonist. He's always saying like that women were acting emotional or unpredictably, while he himself is constantly doing that. I took this book as sort of a commentary and liked how it shone a light on the fact that men don't trust women and often misread them, reflect their own issues at them. And I think when the book was written, this was a very important and maybe a fresh take. I did like reading it, the language was great, I did like discussing it with Shannon, but the experience wasn't as all-consuming as it was with Rebecca, but it was fascinating to follow these characters. I gave this one 3 stars. Next, this horror comic that I ordered at the end of October came in, and this is Frontier 6 and By the Bed by Emily Carroll. This Frontier series is a series of like standalone comic single issues from different changing comic artists, and this one was by Emily Carroll. When I heard about this, I had to order it because I just love Emily Carroll. And this one was about an urban legend called Anne by the Bed, which is based on this fictitious murder, and it gives us little snippets of people's beliefs and sleepover games and such revolving around this murder, without telling us what really happened. Carroll's work are these pieces of dark, fantastic, folkloric horror, and I just eat that up, and I gave this 4 stars. Then I read another owned ebook that was self-published, and that is Poison or Protect by Gail Carriger. And this is a romance novella set in steampunk Victorian England, and they take characters from Carriger's traditionally published works and put them in these self-published romance novellas and give them love interests and so on. In this, the spy Pressure has to go to this house party in the countryside to protect this influential politician, and in the same party there's this love interest for her who is the Scottish captain. And I really like the character of Pressure, but sadly I can't say the same for the love interest. He just didn't interest me, and to be honest, I don't think I've actually liked any of Carriger's like main love interests in her books. They're never really my cup of tea, at least from the works that I have read, and I like all the other characters more. And since this is a romance novella we're talking about, most of the plot centers around the romance, so now when I don't like the main love interest or don't really care about them, it's hard to care about the main driving force of the novella, but I liked Pressure and I liked the writing style, which means I gave this 3 stars. Next, I finished an owned audiobook, and that is Sawkill Girls by Claire Legrand. I bought this because I had gotten a coupon for Audible, so I ended up buying this for I paid like $1 or something. I started listening to this in August during the renovation move, and I just finished this when I was coming back home in the bus in the holiday traffic. So you can see that audiobooks take a while for me to listen and finish. So this is a young adult horror novel about 3 girls who live on this island called Sawkill, and girls tend to go missing in Sawkill. One of the girls is Marian, who is dependable and has just moved to the island. Then there's Zoe, who is the daughter of the police captain, and her friend was the last girl to go missing, so she really wants to get justice. And the final girl is Val, who, like her family has done for generations, is actually helping this murderous creature kill these girls. This book has a sexual rep and a female-female romance. What made this book for me was the narrator, who was very good and set the tone very well. I think she made the book more atmospheric for me than if I had just been reading the actual novel. I don't know how I would have felt reading this, but I did really like the audiobook narrator. I'm not a big audiobook person, but this one was fun to listen to. I enjoyed the journey, even though it won't stick in my mind for very long. I gave it 3 stars. Next, I finished the book from my December TBR video, and that is Gods of Jade and Shadow by Silvia Moreno-Garcia, and this is an owned hardcover. This is set in 1920s Mexico, where a young woman accidentally releases the Mayan god of death, or a Mayan god of death. Cassiopeia is pretty much a maid in her wealthy grandfather's house. She has to do what her other relatives tell her to do, and one day when she's alone in the house, she opens this chest of her grandfather's, and a god of death comes out. So she's whisked away onto this adventure where she's completely entangled in the power struggles of the two brothers who rule the underworld. So this book uses this fairy tale-like omniscient writing style, which gives it a nice atmosphere, but sometimes it wasn't there for a while and I forgot about it and was surprised when it made a reappearance, but it was lovely, especially at the beginning where it was more present. Now, I really wanted to love this book. I really like the aesthetics of it and the death guard thing, of course, and I did like it. It kept a good pace, but I wanted more between the characters to really get behind them, and also some of the events felt a bit episodic, like they went into a different town and there was like one thing that they did there and then they moved on. Also, one thing that I don't tend to like in books is an antagonist POV, which was in this, and it often feels unnecessary, and it did feel unnecessary for me in this. I did really like the Mayan mythology that was incorporated in the book throughout it, and I like the glimpses that we got of the underworld. And also Cassiopeia was an interesting and well-rounded main character to follow, but I wanted to feel more, especially between the two main characters, especially for the Death Guard. And I gave this one 3.5 stars. It was a good read. I liked the language and the main character, but something was missing for me to really root for the main characters. And reading Gods of Jade and Shadow put my TBR count to 69 books. Then I read chapters 1 to 4 of the comic Phantomland by Maaria Laurinen, and this is an owned comic that I had forgotten that I had Phantomland chapter 4 in my All My 100 Books video. So this was in my TBR count for reads and receipts, and I had completely forgotten about it. So I watched my whole TBR video from 2018 before I started the 2019 reads and receipts because I was feeling like I was missing a book. I couldn't get my count to a match. So I watched the video and saw that I had this on it. I had completely forgotten about this. I decided to read this on New Year's Eve to get the countdown. I actually reread the first 3 chapters, then I read this one, and then I continued the webcomic. This is a webcomic, and now I've caught up. So this is a fancy webcomic that tells about this group of individuals that are often called ghosts, and they are basically the police force of their town, Santa Luison. The main character is Jade, who is this young rookie who is trained for the job by the meanest veteran officer around. And together they fight crime, but with quite morally grey means. And this is a very interesting world, and the story gets better as it goes on and as we learn more. I really find very fascinating Jade's dilemma with following her superior officer, who isn't like a kind man. Also, the art is quite beautiful, has very, very clean lines. So like here... Yeah, the characters are very expressive. I liked how they are drawn. So I gave all of these either 3 or 4 stars, and I will link the webcomic in the description. And reading Phantomland Volume 4 brings my TBR count down to 68. Then I also read a couple of nostalgia reads from the library, like books that I had read when I was a kid, so I'm not going to give these stars or even talk a lot about them. The first of those is a Finnish historical fiction book called Ylämaan sudet by Kaisa Ikola. It means wolves of the highlands, and it's set in Scotland. It's about the group of rebels fighting for the Stuarts. This one was only a bit over 100 pages, and it really ran through this story of this rebel group at a really breakneck speed, and it was very much like telling rather than showing. And with this one, I'm not quite sure why I was as enamored with this book as I remember being, and this whole series, there's 3 books. Maybe it sort of scratched the Musketeer itch or something, although I don't know how. The other nostalgia read was Helenan oppivuodet, or Sue Barton Student Nurse by Helen Boylston, and this is a nurse book from the 30s where Sue goes to study to be a nurse. I can see how I liked this as a kid because it had the descriptions of the nurse studies and the work day of a student nurse, and it had a lot of descriptions and details. Since it's from the 30s, I expected more jarring gender role stuff, but they didn't really have those things. At least not a lot in this first book. Apart from the end where there was this really racist thing that attacked me all of a sudden, that was completely unnecessary. I also think that the mental ward would be described differently if this was written in the modern day. But all in all, I had a fun nostalgic time with this, more than I thought actually. And I can see why I like this. Like I said, the descriptions of the nurse studies were interesting. So this is the final time that we are moving on to the 2019 receipts. Did I make progress in my A to Z TBR challenge? No. Did I complete a TBR chart challenge? No. Let's go to a bit of a haul part. I bought a bunch of ebooks on sale in December. The first thing I actually bought in November, and that is A Terrible Beauty by Nancy Baker, which is like a fairy tale retelling with vampires. So I think it's Beauty and the Beast, but with a vampire woman. And I just forgot to show this in November. Then I got Signal to Noise by Silvia Moreno-Garcia. I think this is her debut, and it has music as magic, and I think it's set in the 90s, or it's about a group of people who were friends in the 90s. I can't remember, but that one was on sale. And then I got Sister Light, Sister Dark by Jane Yolen. I think this is like a classic young adult fantasy book. I noticed that it was on sale, even though I don't remember much about it. I had added it to my wishlist, so I know that I want to read it. Then I also got another Tanith Lee, which was on sale, because I read Knight's Master and really enjoyed it. This is from the series The Secret Books of Paradise, and this is the first book, The Book of the Damned. This is set in like a fantasy gothic version of Paris, I think. Also, Don't Go Without Me by Rosemary Valero O'Connell, that I had helped kickstart in October, came in the digital version. I decided to go with a digital copy since this has 3 stories and I already own one of them, what is left in a physical format, so I just got the digital one. So finally we're moving on to Can I Buy, and I really don't know, because I did finish 3 things. I finished Gods of Jade and Shadow, Frontier, and Phantomland chapter 4, but those comics were so short that I don't even know if they count. Then can I buy an ebook? And yes, I can, because I read 3. I can buy one if I read one. So in January I have already bought one ebook from sale, and that was Flotsam by R.J. Theodore. This is book 1 in the series called Peridot Shift, and I thought this was a self-published steampunk novel, but I think it's actually from a small press. I bought this because I learned about a novella that I want to read that is set in the same world, but the 2 books that come before that need to be read before reading the novella, so when this was on sale I got it. The Can I Borrow part is a question mark like the physical book, but I have borrowed a couple of things from the library. I have borrowed Bet by Akwaeke Emezi, and I have borrowed Laura Dean Keeps Breaking Up With Me by Mariko Tamaki and Rosemary Valero O'Connell. This is like a Rosemary Valero O'Connell haul. So finally, for the stats, in December I read 15 books. I read 1,932 pages. That is 62 pages a day on average, and I took on average 14 days to read a book. But that is because it took me 142 days to listen to Sawkill Girls, because I listen to it on and off because I'm bad with audiobooks. So if you take Sawkill Girls out, my average days to read a book is 5. So after reading these, my current physical TBR number, final number for 2019, is 68 books. Like I said, I'm taking January off, so the next reads and receipts will come out in February, but of course there will be other videos in the meantime. But that's all from me for now, and I'll see you in my next video.